Number 15, to find the zeros of the quadratic, we're really looking for the x-intercepts, and we know that the y-coordinate's always 0 if it crosses the x-axis, so the first step is to set this quadratic equal to 0. And then to solve algebraically, we have three options. We could try to factor and apply the zero product property. Isolate x squared method is another option. However, in this scenario with three terms, we can't use that method. And then quadratic formula always works. So if I try to factor this, I would check method number 3, and I would ask myself, are there any factors that multiply to -6 and add to -4? And unfortunately, there are no factors here. So we can't use that first option, so we are down to the quadratic formula. So let's identify a, b, and c. A is the number in front of the x squared, so that's a 1. B is the number in front of the x, that's a -4, and c is the constant, -6. So our formula, x equals fraction bar up top, the opposite of b. If b is -4, the opposite is +4, plus or minus the square root. B squared, so -4 squared is 16. And then the formula is always -4, and we open up double parentheses because in the formula, after the -4, we're multiplying a and c. A is 1, and c is -6. And that's all over 2 times a, and a is 1. So let's start simplifying. So x equals 4 plus or minus the square root, 16. Since I'm multiplying the three numbers after it, I'm looking and I see two negatives, and when you're multiplying, that would be positive. And then 4 times 1 times 6 is 24. And that's all over 2. So x equals fraction bar 4 plus or minus the square root of, this would be 40, all over 2. If I look at the square root, I notice that 40 is not a perfect square, so I'm going to need to make a factor tree to see if it has any pairs. So 4 and 10 make 40, 4 is 2 and 2, and then 10 is 5 and 2. So I see a pair of 2's, so I know that this can be simplified. A 2 is going to go on the outside, and the 5 and 2 recombine. You're going to multiply them together to get 10. So let's rewrite our fraction here. X equals 4 plus or minus 2 root 10, all over 2. And then we're going to look at the whole numbers. If I could divide these by a common factor, you would simplify, and I could divide all of these by 2. So if I rewrite, I have x equals 4 divided by 2 is 2, plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1. So it's just the square root of 10, all over 1. And if I want to separate my answers, I would have one using the plus sign, so 2 plus the square root of 10. And then the second one would be using the minus sign, 2 minus the square root of 10.